Alright, another day. We're gonna record another chess video here, so let's get it started. Alright, we're playing with the black pieces, and we're gonna go into Sicilian defense. Playing d6. I played this in the last video, and hopefully we can redeem ourselves and come back from the loss that we had in the last video. So we have 3d4, which is slightly different from last time, but if it's kind of like a altered move order from a normal Sicilian here. But we'll play a6 transposing to the Najdorf variation, and we have f3, which some of the times this can transpose into like an English attack type setup here. So the response I like to play to f3 here is a move e5, kicking the knight to b3, and then playing bishop to e6 here, controlling the d5 square if the knight jumps to d5. So now we have bishop e3, which signals to me he's probably going to be, he transposes it to an English attack here. And the point of the English attack is a lot of the times you want to put your queen on d2, and then bishop to e7, and then you want to actually castle queenside and start g4 and g5 and attack ferociously. Basically, it's going to be like an opposite side castle game, and white is trying to attack ferociously on the king side, while I'm doing a counter attack here on the queen side. So this might be an exciting game. We'll see. Bishop e7, you have queen d2, and then we'll castle and then play knight bd7 next. Well, depending on what his next move is, we can do b5, but we'll play knight bd7 first here, and then we're going to expect g4, g5, to which we'll respond b5, b4 here is the key moves we'll have to respond with. And this is kind of counterintuitive here. It's exciting, but when he puts his pawn on g5, we actually respond with b4, because b4 is an actual stronger threat than g5. Because g5, if you calculate the capture sequence after that, g5 you have to take the knight, the bishop, and then get to the queen. But after b4, we're threatening the queen on the second capture. So that's the reason that b4 is like a more compelling move than g5. So he plays h4, which is not, it might be a book move. The move I'm familiar with is g5, because really in this position g5 doesn't require any setup, but he's setting it up anyway with g4. But what this does is it allows us to play b4 on our terms, and that's one of the responses valid. The knight can come to d5 here, which is a move I see in a lot of positions, and then the knight can also come to back to e2 here, reinforcing his attack maybe, and also this square on f4. But the knight coming to d5 is probably one of the most common responses I see. And to that we respond with bishop takes d5, and then I think the move here is actually knight to b6. And this line, you basically have to know it by heart, because it's kind of like counterintuitive throughout the whole thing. The English attack, at least to me it is. So that's why I spend a lot of my time memorizing responses in this line. So I believe the proper response in this situation is knight b6, and the idea of that is if he plays g5, we can just take back with the knight here, and that would also be the response if he took on b4 here, is we take back with a knight. And if he takes with his bishop here, We can take back with a queen, then we're guarding this pawn and creating an escape square for our knight here. So we'll play knight b6. Kind of a, maybe it looks counterintuitive here because we're hanging a pawn. It also seems like we're scared of g5, but the point is we're double attacking this pawn now, and the defender is of greater value than our two knights. So he can't actually recapture here if we take this pawn, even though he has two defenders, because again, the queen is of greater value. He doesn't want to give up the queen for the two knights. So now white is left with a choice. White can play g5. He can take this pawn. This pawn is free, but then we get this pawn here, because then only the rook is guarding. White could also play another move, maybe like bring the bishop out to reinforce the attack and get a rook to g1, which is probably the strongest continuation in my opinion. But white is kind of already in a bit of trouble here. I don't think the knight on d5 is actually the best continuation for move 13. I think the knight in most book moves usually comes back either to e2 or somewhere else in order to reinforce the attack a little bit better. But now our opponent is thinking, which makes sense, because now I think technically we're out of the books by this point. He has to, which is good. We're forcing him to think with his own brain at this point. Another interesting threat is we're threatening just to play, like, let's say his bishop moves off this diagonal here. We're threatening also, because his queen and bishop are on a forkable square, we're threatening to play knight to c4, forking the queen and the bishop and eliminating basically the dark squared bishop there, which would somewhat hamper his attack, shall we say, on the king side there. So I think the engine would probably prefer black slightly in this variation. And it really depends how accurately white is going to play here, as to how this game is going to go, I would say. There's like strong threats on both sides of the board here. But in my opinion, this variation, I seem to find that black's attack here on the white king is a lot more like substantive than white's attack here towards black's king. And I don't know why that is. I probably don't face a lot of players that know how to play this variation as well as I do, probably. Might be a reason why. But I think the move, let's see, knight to a5. We have a pretty devastating response, I would say, which is just taking the pawn on d5, because 1, it attacks his bishop, 2, it guards the pawn, and 3, we're revealing an attack on the knight. The revealed attack on the knight is why I would rather use this knight probably than the knight on f6, even though it's hard for me to say because they still have the move g5 if we use this knight, but I think the revealed attack is somewhat stronger. And let's see where his knight could move. His knight could move here, forking our bishop and queen, so that could be an issue. Let's see. Well, what is our response to that? What is the continuation to knight c8? We could just guard our bishop, obviously. And g5, does that drop? Actually, let's see. Knight takes on d5 might be stronger because g5 would force this knight away. I don't want to overthink this. Let me think a minute here. Which knight we should? I'm fixated on the move of taking on d5. Another option could be rook c8, but I don't think that's as strong. I think we're fixated on taking this knight on. We're taking this pawn on d5 here, so we gotta decide which knight to use, and I'm gonna think about it for a minute here, not talk. We're gonna take with a knight on f6 here. And now white has a bishop pair, but hopefully we can eliminate that within the next move or two here, because it is a slight problem. Yeah, we're guarding everything, I would say, pretty nicely here. And it seems like we're mostly liquidating pieces off the board after after queen takes on d6 here. Let's see, we cannot use these squares because of the bishop. Let's see, I think material is equal here, but in an endgame situation, white may have the advantage here. So how do we want to proceed? We don't want to blunder this knight here. I'll guard the knight with this rook, but this will blunder the pawn, so maybe we have to guard the knight with this rook, drop the knight back perhaps, because we are guarding this square with the knight here, so it's not like the knight is useless on this square. It just doesn't have a lot of prospects as of now, and white's bishop is undeveloped, but is doing an important job, I would say, there. Maybe we have to swing the knight around in a pretty awkward manner here to get it to a more useful square without blundering it. And also another idea we have is to activate our king here for an all hands on deck solution towards the end game. But we will see what our opponent's plan is here. And we may want to also push our pawn so the bishop is not eyeing a pawn here. Okay. Bishop to we have bishop to d3 here. And this discourages our king from moving immediately. So I would say maybe moving the knight blunders a pawn, so we may have to move this pawn first. In order to prepare our knight to move. And this also gets our pawn off the light squares. So this bishop will not be able to harass these pawns ever. We can protect this pawn with the move f6 here, and it also opens up a route for our king since these squares here, key squares, are protected. Yes. Let's play f6 since we don't want to blunder our pawn, and I'm thinking of playing rerouting our knight. A little bit awkward of a manner here. And now can play king to f7 here. It blunders this h7 pawn. But I think we may not have a choice. We can take, but there's no real good way to defend this pawn if we take this way after recaptures. I think activating our king is the way we have to go here. And if captures, we have a square for our knight. Or we could maybe try to trap. Well, no, because that hangs this pawn. But we have ideas. We have ideas. We can maybe try to kick the rook. Or trap the rook. Or trap the bishop. Let's see. We could try to kick the rook. And skewer the bishop to the pawn, perhaps. Hopefully get more active pieces here. Our rooks are more passive than whites, I would say. Although they are supporting pawn pushes towards the king side here. But I would say taking this pawn's this pawn, it leaves a little bit of counterplay. Because if we play knight c4, his rook checks, we can move up here with check, and then his rook most likely will be left on this rank here. Let's see. Maybe we can play No, because then he plays rook back. If we play rook to h8, he takes. We take. And then he can defend this pawn. And just probably is more active in general. Alright, let's... I just c4. We don't have many good prospects of the knight anyways. Let's try this and see what our opponent does. Our opponent, I'm expecting either to move rook to d7 or rook to c6. And rook d7, I think we'll play king to e6, attacking the rook, but he can double his rooks. And this also defends the bishop here. However, if he moves his rook to double, we have more squares with our knight. But this is another avenue in which I see the opponent harassing our knight. And we might have to respond with rook to c8, offering a rook trade. And our opponent will most likely have a pass pawn that we have to deal with. All right. I do not know what the opponent is intending with rook to g7 here. Let's see. Thinking about playing. Maybe he's thinking of pushing his pawn up the board. However, I'm thinking of using our proximity of these pawns to the king side, try to push one of these pawns up the board. So let's start pushing P here. Let's start pushing the pawns to try to get some sort of attack going here on the white queen side. It's still a queen side because queen starts on d1, but that's where the king is here. Currently we're down a pawn, so, and this is an endgame. It's just a knight versus bishop with rooks type endgame. And it's hard to say what's going on in this position. I think with this passed pawn, white is probably better here, but we also have more advanced pawns than white does. So we'll see what we can do with those, if that is of any value. And if white pushes, we can take, and I think maybe set some traps here with a rook check, but we'll see. We'll see. If white pushes, I think that may be like a losing mistake, because again, these squares are guarded by the knight, and it's not impossible that a checkmate could even happen with some sort of rook back here sliding in on a1, or a check and then forking this pawn here, picking up a pawn. The king moves back, and then getting this very nice d4 square. Then our main problem would be just not allowing the pass pawn here to queen. We cannot allow a queened pawn. But we'll see if this attack here has any merit. Yeah, bishop to d3 is probably a good defensive resource. Let's see, where should the knight drop? Knight most likely has to move, I would think. Our knight can drop back to these two squares. I don't like it blocking the rooks though in these squares, and it cannot move forward. So I think we're pretty much forced to play knight d6, which is not terrible here. And we can maybe liquidate some of these pawns here. All right. Are we getting cooked here with this pawn? I think this may set a trap. If we're not, let's see, calculate him taking the pawn, taking check here. Here he doesn't have anything along this diagonal because of the knight. Take, check here. It's a little bit scary. It is a little bit scary. And of course we can't take, but we'll play b3. Try to get some counterplay, because if he just ignores this pawn here, and it gets to a2, there's actually no way his king can come to block. So yeah, we're just pushing p towards the king here, and let's see how he reacts. Let's see if he panics, or because luckily our knight has been a decent defensive resource here for our king, or for basically our position. Takes, we'll have to take back because we can't allow any sort of revealed checks, but then he still has to reckon with this pawn. So we will see what happens. We will see. I think with accurate play, white is certainly better here, but there's a lot of tricks that he has to reckon with is the thing here, and we may be able to trick white. Because I think we may be winning a pawn here. Takes. Or at least causing his bishop to have to move, and we get behind this pawn. He could move here and then consolidate, but we'll see what happens here. We don't have to calculate all that ahead of time. Don't have to get ahead of ourselves here. Okay. He shuts down whatever is going on here on the king side. So we have now some some prospects. We have take. Can take this pawn here, and then get our rook. That's a little bit sloppy. Let's see, take, and then rook pins the bishop. And then maybe double stack our rooks eventually, or we could go straight for the pin here. Let's take. He really should just ignore this pawn, I believe. Maybe. I mean, maybe he's scared of it. Maybe he's scared of the pawn. But generally, you probably actually don't want to let, in Najdorf English attack games, you don't want to let the game get to an endgame, because typically white has a decent advantage in Sicilian endgames where it's opposite side castle because of a pawn majority on the queen side here. And not to mention he does still have the extra pawn here, and he has a bishop versus a knight, so things are not looking great. But we may, if he takes with a bishop, we may be able to trick him with something like a knight to c4, perhaps, because this pawn is hanging, and it's not impossible. He could blunder a fork. We would also guard this pawn here. Okay, I think that's correct. And I think we're pretty much forced to take back. He can deliver a check here, but this, I don't know where it goes. Alright, I think he's considering taking the pawn with his rook. Here. So I believe maybe we can go rook to h8, threatening this pawn here. And if he goes bishop, and then if he goes here, we trade, takes, rook to h8, bishop comes back, and then we pick up the pawn there in exchange, but then he picks up this pawn. And then we're at a one versus 2 basically here, but our pawn is more advanced. So I don't actually think that would be too bad for black because of our pawn being advanced. However, we'll see. We'll see. We might be able to come back and pin the bishop instead. Or actually, no, he can't pick up this pawn at the end because our rook will be on h4. I didn't see that in the calculation. So That's only if he goes rook to h7. I think rook to h7 might not be the most accurate here. I think he can still go rook to h2. Or yeah, rook to... That's a great move. Because now he's attacking this pawn. We could try to bring our knight into the action here. And it's also threatening this pawn. I think after knight 2, we would have to capture knight takes here. I think this might be the correct move. Because bishop takes, check here. I mean, he captures his pawn. It's hard to say. This is probably a draw. I mean, probably taking the knight is accurate because after this, he doubles his rooks. My king will be here. Check. Maybe we want to retreat our king instead. And we're cut off from this side of the board with our king. Yeah. I really don't know. We are running low on time though, so we'll kind of have to go into blitz mode a little bit if time gets too low. Here we have an increment that we have to remember, because I think it's, what, 10 seconds per move, which is pretty good increment, but we'll see how our opponent responds. We'll attend to this. Okay. I think I may see a trap that we can eventually employ here. So I'll try to set a trap for him. Because these rooks are kind of fixed here. So if we take a pawn, or if he moves the other rooks off this file, we get to pick up the other rook. So we're kind of using tactics here as a last resort to try to hold this position here. And it might be a draw even though he's up his passed pawn. I don't think it will be, but perhaps. I don't know. Rook to h1 looks winning to me, but that's kind of a hard move to spot, I would think, in a position such as this. Okay. I think we can trade rooks and take here, and I think our king is close enough to the action where we'll probably be able to make a draw. Majority on the pawn majority on the queen side is something that could. All right, let's get our rook in. Wait, let's get our king up. And this prevents his king from moving forward. If he pushes his pawn, he can't recapture it because his rook is here. If he plays rook to h3, this might require some calculation here, here. Pawn takes, king takes, king takes. Here, here. I think he has opposition in that line. So let's see. Here, here. Here, here, check, takes, then he just plays king there, then we have king back here, and we're winning. If he plays pawn up there, he has to take back, we play on there. I think this is a draw. It's hard for me to say. No, it's not. Because his king moves up and takes a pawn. Yeah, and this is pretty simple endgame. So ultimately we lose an endgame here. Yeah, we lose. Alright, good game to our opponent, and we'll analyze the game. Let's see. That was highly accurate, probably, on his part, especially in the middle game. I probably made a... No, it's not too accurate here. So we have book moves. That's fine. I've never been... I don't think... Yeah, h4 is where you're getting out of the book, and then b5. Bishop takes is a great move, and knight b6. So this is where we start to go wrong. Let's see. Knight a5 is a great move. Damn. Yeah, I've never encountered a player that plays knight a5 in response to that. So instead of knight b6, what was best here? Yes, a4 or a5, I mean just reinforcing the threats here on the king side. That's pretty instructive. Knight a5 takes. Inaccuracy to take back. Best move, best move, best move, best move, best move, best move. Bishop takes is a mistake. And yeah, we just kind of fell apart after. Yeah, it's kind of close to being a draw here, but rook to c8 is a blunder because we should have defended the pawn, I guess, with this. Yeah, I was probably close after that, but I tried using some tactics that ultimately didn't work. Missed. Let's see. What? Let's see. That's kind of a counterintuitive move. Putting the king in front of the rook there. But king e4 would have held a draw. Probably king e4 again. Yeah, and now we lost the endgame there. Alright, so yeah, some accurate responses from our opponent there. So knight b6, ultimately takeaway, knight b6 was incorrect because it allows this square on a5 to be occupied by the knight, getting into c6 and causing problems for the black player here is the main takeaway to that. A Najdorf English variation. Obviously our opponent probably was the most accurate response I've seen to knight b6 so far. So let's try another game here and see if we can get a win, hopefully. Alright, so we got, our opponent is rated 1600 and we're with the white pieces. We'll play e4. Now we have a Caro Kann defense, which starts with a move c6. We're going to play d4 against that. Most openings where your opponent doesn't put a pawn in the center, you're going to put both your pawns in the center, and that is just like the start of how most classical games start. So now we have d4, the correct follow-up, and we're going to take, to which most players will respond c takes, which is the whole point of the Caro Kann, and then we'll play c4, which initiates the Panov attack against the Caro Kann. And the Panov attack, the point of it is kind of similar to a Queen's Gambit type position where you're giving this pawn, and if they take, it can just be recaptured by the bishop on c4 with a good position. And if they don't take, such as playing knight f6, which is the next book move, you can play knight c3, and now you have kind of an imbalanced position here because of your pawns, because of the pawn structure here. Your pawn on c4 versus the hole he has on the c file, and your hole is on the e file here. So half open e file versus half open C file here. So knight c3 is the next book move, and you can go into the 4 knights kind of Panov attack, but a6 is a move which kind of like preemptively prevents maybe like a knight b5 or a bishop b5 after taking idea. But let's see. We can play knight f3. A typical move is to kind of wait for this bishop to come out and then play queen c6 here, kind of piling up on both, or queen b3, sorry, piling up on the d5 pawn and on the b7 pawn here. So that's if he brings his bishop out too early. But we're expecting probably knight c6. a6 is kind of a, I don't know if it's a book move or not, but we'll bring out our knight to f3, kind of the most simple developing move we can take. And then definitely we want to take back with a bishop here, I would say. That's like an automatic move. And then we see the point of a6 is he wanted to play b5 after this. So do we have any tactics yet? No, I don't think we do. So we can drop the bishop back to b3. And now we have an isolated queen's pawn type of position. And I don't really mind if he pushes b4, I don't think. Okay. Because I don't think it is too weakening, but now it might be a little bit weakening to put our knight on e2 if he pushes b4. So we could consider playing d5, except I think it just hangs a pawn after b4, unless there's some counter intermezzo move we can play there. Intermezzo, he'll have to put a knight or a piece or something there. So let's see, let's calculate d5. You can also play, I like to move d5 because it blocks this diagonal, but it might be a little bit too early for b5 or d5. Let's see, d5, knight takes, bishop takes. So it's guarded right off the bat, but what if he plays b4 here and tries to force us to move the knight? We could play bishop to a4 check, which is an intermezzo move. He'll have to interpose the check basically with either a piece or, yeah, he can't interpose there. He'll have to interpose on the square d7. So I think the way he'll do that is a knight. And then after that, he will not have, he'll only have 2 attackers. We'll have 1 less defender because our knight will have to move at the end of that line. So I think it's probably too early for the move. For that move. So we'll play, let's see. The problems we have here are the threat of taking, but then he drops his rook. So it's not a threat yet. We don't have to play bishop to e3 to reinforce yet. He has b4, still the idea of b4. Let's play, I mean, this knight e5 is just straight up a checkmate threat. You'll probably have to respond with e6. And then our pawn here is hanging, so we might have to castle. But I like that because it gets our knight away from being taken. We could play a4, inducing the move b4. Or we could play a3 to try to take the sting out of b4 here. We can play a3 to try to take the sting out of b4 since we'll just capture. We'll play a3 for now, and then we'll expect a move like an e6 probably. And now we can put our bishop on g5 here. And castle. Expect bishop e7. Castles most likely. And then a goal we want to try to shoot for is pushing the pawn up, because the IQP can either be a weakness or a strength. And now an interesting possibility we have is takes. We don't want to push the pawn before we take if this knight is still there. We can also just castle, complete our development, and then start looking for middle game ideas here. I think we'll go with this plan. And then when the knight comes out, now we have knight either comes to c6 or it comes to d7 here. He still hasn't developed the knight. So let's see what options we have here. We can move our knight to e5. We can move rook to c8, already preemptively getting on this open c file here, half open c file. We could move bishop c7, trying to set up a battery, or we could move queen to. We could move our queen to d2 or e3 here. D2 or d3, trying to set up a battery. I kind of like queen to d3 since it still guards the knight. We have a threat of moving the bishop back, and then it connects our rooks. And I don't think that the queen is vulnerable to attack yet. And then we can play rook to d1, and then maybe bishop to c7. Kind of straightforward ways to start pointing pieces over here towards the king side. Our pieces are pretty well developed. Black hasn't developed their second knight yet, so we'll look for it to come to either d7. Okay, and this could allow us to maybe push here. I don't like the idea of pushing while our g5 bishop is only protected once, because that goes into a calculation here where we push, they take with a knight, and they're double attacking the bishop, and then when we take the bishop back, his knight drops back and evacuates, and at the end he's just up a pawn. So I think the other advantage of knight d7 is, I mean, it looks passive, but he's defending this knight twice, so we don't have this idea of taking the knight and checkmating if our bishop drops back to c7. Furthermore, we don't have the idea of taking, then pushing d5. So I think to reinforce the threat of d5, we might have to move our rooks and centralize our rooks here. So we'll do, let's see, which rook do we want to come to what square? Could also move knight to, no, we can't. Well, let's see. We'll move this rook to e1, and the other rook will want to come to d1, I believe. Okay, he's taking advantage of this pin here. That's probably, yeah, I didn't even see that move. Knight to c5. So now the threat of this sequence, I guess I'll say, is queen drops back. We have to recapture the bishop. Bishop takes f3. And upon recapture, he ruins our pawn structure and is up an extra pawn on top of that. Let's see what we have. We cannot take because we just hang the queen. But a continuation of that with this queen on d4 here is the other rook coming to d1. Maybe the bishop taking here and the rook ending up on the 7th rank here. So I don't think white is left without counterplay in this line. So knight to c5 was a good move, probably. But it doesn't leave us without counterplay, I would say. Because our pieces, this check is guarded by the pawn, which is awkwardly put on f3. And the rook the queen will have to evacuate, and the rook will be able to get to d7. So we'll be down a central pawn, but have probably slightly more piece activity here for our pieces. If he goes down this continuation of taking the pawn here, then our rook will be able to infiltrate. And he'll have, let's see, which squares will he be able to go to with his queen. He will be able to try to offer a queen trade. He will be able, yeah, I think he has to try to offer a queen trade is the only, I think the only possibility. But that pawn is a little bit annoying on c4 there, because it restricts the possibility of us pushing. However, it's probably able to be attacked. We don't even have to accept the queen trade as well. But I think not accepting the queen trade might give black a little bit more initiative. Okay, so this does not go into a queen trade line. Okay, I think the plan that I've formulated here is bishop takes knight, freeing up the square here. Bishop takes knight to e5, improving our knight first, because the bishop might have to go back to this diagonal to avoid being captured and ruining a structure. This bishop could go there. Actually, his bishop can go there because his queen is protecting. So maybe this most straightforward response is rook to try knight to e5 because it guards this square and it guards this square if we're able to come up here, double our rooks on a different file. And if his bishop comes here, we can play maybe queen b4, attacking the bishop, and if rook comes to d2, we'll see. We'll see. Interesting. So he's attacking it from another way. So if we play rook to d6 here, I think it might be a blunder after that, because it forces our knight back and actually hangs the rook. So, and he's also threatening to just play f4. So I might have to double our rooks in a manner such as rook to d2 and then rook to e, or rook e to d1. We also could go for an aggressive maybe we could go double our rooks such as like this. Offering up a queen trade would be a blunder because then, oh wait. Let's see. Let's go for that. Let's go to try to get the only compensation we can from this position, which is the rooks on the 7th rank here. And then if rook comes to d8, I think we'll have to go. I'm not sure which is more accurate. We'll have to go. Queen. And then he'll be forced to move some sort of pawn here in order to make space for his king to not get mated on the back rank. And if he moves h3, h6, okay. We cannot take his rook. Well, we can take his rook. His bishop will just have to... I think it'll enter an endgame that we're very not suited to win. So how am I thinking about going about this position? We could play perhaps try to kick this bishop onto a square, which it can be captured. And also get our king out of this pin here. So So let's see how our opponent responds. All right, f4. Yeah, was set up probably by h3 because f4. Now we don't have the opportunity to. Let's see. I think we're pretty much forced to play knight g3. And then we might be getting cooked here. Deep fried. I don't see any sort of tactics. But maybe he will allow us to hop in, shall we say, to h5. The only problem with that is it like pretty much blunders checkmate. So I'll have to make sure we're not doing that. And if he pushes, we just return the knight to guard the square. I think this is a little bit cautious of a move by him. He's reattacking this threat. Actually, he's not attacking this because, okay, knight h5. If he takes, he's dropping this rook. So, and if he takes the rook, we go there, he takes, and then we have nothing. Go check. This king must drop to h7. Yeah, I mean there's a trick there. I don't think it works, but try it. And try knight h5. Because if the bishop moves off this diagonal here, he's moved off the diagonal that was attacking this pawn here, so we're free to leave the pawn. If he moves the bishop off first before taking this rook, then I mean this queen has just been in the right spot to defend this pawn the whole time, so we can't take it after this. And then we don't have a mate here because the bishop will still be along that diagonal. But we have some checks, perhaps. I think his king is pretty much safe, though. If he takes bishop b2, I don't think the checks here will be sufficient. Could maybe drop the knight back to f4 before giving him checks and try to give him a perpetual. So I think that will be the move. If he takes with a rook, we take back. He takes, we move knight to f4, maybe setting up a perpetual check on the white squares here. And if he's not careful, maybe even checkmate, but it's kind of unlikely in this position for him to blunder that. If he blunders taking b2, we just take a rook there. And he's up. Yeah. He'll be up material. He'll be up material, and as long as he doesn't blunder a perpetual check, I think he will be fine. I mean, he could go like queen to, I think queen to d5 basically shuts down like all my ideas. Queen to d4. Try to go here. Knight f4. I think even bishop takes a3. But then maybe we have knight takes. Knight takes e6. Setting up some threats. I don't know, it's not sufficient after bishop takes a3. It's not sufficient to survive. We've just been getting cooked in these games. Knight c5 was the move. Didn't look for tactics enough. But yeah, he's taking his time now. I think he's a little bit scared of these checkmate threats. I'll go knight. Knight takes e6. And he's up these two pass pawns here. And also I have worse pawn structure on this side. Check. think this might be a mistake. Because I think I have some sort of perpetual now. Either that or... Yeah, I think I have this. Do I have a mate? I don't think I have a mate, though. Because this king has to return. Basically to the square. And then we have like... If our knight could move to a square which guards that, which it can't. But if it could... Wait, am I winning the queen here? Yeah, I'm winning the queen. That's cooked. That's cooked on his part. Oh shit. Alright, what's the simplest way we can win here? And just set up an Anastasia's mate on this side. If he doesn't guard this square, it's over. Yeah, I don't know how I'm just not seeing tactics today, but yeah, he got cooked by a little trick there with setup. Knight takes e6. I think the correct move was actually bishop comes back, guarding any sort of mate threat, and then just like pushing his pawn. I think he was winning. And I think now he's just toast. After this, because this guards these squares, and we just have Anastasia's mate. And his king can't escape. Yeah, unfortunate blunder of our opponent, but it cost him the game. Gotta always be wary of the knight late into the game. We're lucky we didn't resign too early here. And he's got 5 minutes on the clock here. So resigns. All right, now let's get into the review. I mean, probably up until allowing knight c5 was fine. That move was not on my puny brain radar. Bishop c4. We're doing pretty well. b5. Does that allow any tactics? I think, yeah, bishop b3, correct from us. Bishop b7. I was kind of overly scared of b4. Probably, yeah, it says a3 was just a bad move to gain the initiative. Just castling would have been simpler. But castle e6, or sorry, a3, e6, bishop g5, bishop e7 is equal now. So I lost the initiative. Castle, castle, and then queen to e3. Rook d1 is probably more accurate, but we played queen to e3, knight b d7. It's just a solid move. And then more accurate here, I guess, would have been bishop c2. Yeah, and the point of that is not this mate threat like it looks like, but the point of it is actually to get away from the forkable square here on c5 because of the pin on the queen, and you're also adding a defender the queen from bishop c2. So bishop c2 would be a way to try to defend against this threat, because now he can just take if he plays. But definitely now black is fighting for the initiative. Yeah, I just blundered knight c5, and we were basically just cooked from that moment out, trying to create some counterplay here with rook a to d1. Bishop takes. We have knight d4. Yeah, I don't think that was the best. I was expecting bishop d4 because it also blocks off a rook. But yeah, we get our rook in. I'm looking for like the only counterplay I can get here, and then probably queen to d3. I was thinking trying to keep pieces on the board was the most active way to try to create threats here. King to g2, and my idea with that was try to kick this bishop to a square where we can capture it, because upon a recapture we win the rook if he doesn't take first. I'm just like, at this point I'm trying to complicate the game when you're losing. So kind of a lesson for like when you're losing a chess game. When you're losing a chess game, basically you got to make moves that try to, one, like set traps, but are also like decent moves that hold together the position in general. And two, you want to try to like complicate the game. So the opponent, you give them choices which some of them look natural, but they're bad choices. So we have knight to h5, another example of this, because if you look at the engine, bishop d4 is the only move that doesn't just straight up equalize. So rook takes, man, I missed knight takes f6 because it picks up the rook. So knight takes f6 would have picked up, removed wait, knight takes f6. Why is that so good? Because the rook is hanging anyway. Basically because of the vulnerability of the king, we are now guaranteed some sort of perpetual. But yeah, we pick up the rook, bishop takes b2, and then we have knight to f4, because I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, oh, if bishop drops back or something here, now we have this perpetual check, forcing the game into a draw. So that's what I was looking at there with knight f4. Says the second best move. I didn't like queen e8 check immediately because his king moves there, and I thought, well, there's like basically no follow-up there. But maybe queen e8 check and then knight f4 was, the engine likes it more. Knight takes e6, and then yeah, I was expecting bishop f8 like I said in the game. That's literally the only choice. The engine says that holds the game together, and he missed bishop f8. He played bishop b2, which loses on the spot because of queen e8 check. This nice little tactic, the king can't run out, or else we take it twice, and then you move the knight back because knights are tricky. Picking up the queen with check, gotta move back, and we pick up the queen, loop back around for Anastasia's mate. So I hope that was instructive. That was just a bad game on my part, but we found a tactic to win in the end, unfortunately for our opponent. So yeah, we can go into more analysis as we see more Caro Kann games, but this was one where they kind of take on c4, and you just take back with a bishop, and then you have a pretty good position, probably slightly more active piece with an isolated queen's pawn here. And then the a6 idea by our opponent, a6, setting up b5. You don't really have to be scared of b4, I guess is the lesson here. After bishop b7, you just castle because b4 doesn't come with much merit, I guess, like I was thinking, because of the mate threat, yeah, of knight e5. Because now he's not taking. He has to play e6. Bishop a4 check. Wow, yeah, he's cooked. Yeah, he's cooked after that. So, yeah. Hope that is instructive. Hope that is somewhat instructive. And hope you're having a good day. That concludes the end of this video.